When ministry has been your life and you've been able to give a voice to the voiceless around the world, you need to write a book about it. You need to share that encouragement. Stories that change you to your core, your soul. You're a different person because of people that you've met and the stories that you've experienced. And that's who we're going to talk to next. It's Al and Susan Henson wrote the book Breaking Invisible Chains. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here, Al and Susan.
We're glad to be here.
We're blessed to be here.
Well, let's just go ahead and start. Al, let's talk about the ministry that you began. You were pastoring a church, and God called you to serve and minister to people around the world. Would you kind of give us just that baseline, that foundational story?
Yeah. In the area where we were ministering here in America, our hearts were moved to travel back in difficulty and at risk to go minister and speak to them. And on an occasion when I was there, I had an opportunity to peer over a mountain into a prison where a dear brother that I had been a part of ministering to was coming up out of a hot box. And he was skin and bones. He was chained, shackled at his feet and his hands. And my heart broke. And I sat under a tree later and said, God, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And
What did he say?
The Spirit just spoke to my heart and said, you and Susan will become a voice. Go back to the brothers and sisters in America, and you will cry out, help my hurting body, help my hurting children. And so this book is being birthed as a part of that, to cry out to brothers and sisters, for these brothers and sisters that have been imprisoned.
Susan, your eyes were opened as well, but in a different way. Would you share that?
Yes, as we were serving among these persecuted believers, we also realized that there was a darkness there that was affecting the children, and anywhere where the power of the gospel had not been and penetrated, we were seeing this darkness. And we realized that we were the first to be affected by that. And that's when our hearts were burdened that we needed to rise up and open up homes of hope to get as many children as possible into the arms of Jesus, in a place where they could be safe and have a future and a hope.
So there's different persecutions that are talked about in this book. There's different segments of the book. Is that right?
Yes. And as we walked into the hearts of these children that have been abandoned, abused, and trafficked, and child brides, we realized that there are prison bars. There are prisons that have no bars.
Yeah.
And these children were enchained in the pain and the suffering that they were facing from abandonment and abuse. And we just knew we needed to get them to Jesus. And these are part of their stories, and their stories of freedom and hope to set captives free.
Yeah. And men and women full of greed and selfishness and lust were exploiting these precious ones. And at the last half of the book, the first half deals with the persecuted, but the last half deals with this form of persecution, where we are rescuing and bringing the love of God and the power of the gospel into not orphanages, but homes where there's family and food and safety and love. And they're beautiful stories of God's redemptive power and the power of the gospel and of God's love.
Let's hear about one of those stories.
There's thousands of them, but there was two young ladies named Yin and Yang, 13 and 14. And in their tribal culture, it was appropriate for an older man, for example, to go after, to apprehend one of these, and then to approach the family to receive them and him as his bride. And they would actually be forced into this situation. And so Yin and Yang, we heard of the story. We went to them And with the older one, Yang, her mother finally said, yes, she can go with you into one of the homes of hope, because she was being pursued now by a much older man. And if he pursued her and captured her, he could have her for 7 days and have his ways with her, and
Oh,
trying to persuade her to be his wife. If he could not, and she said no, and then he would pay a fine. But the family would coerce her to try to say yes. We rescued them in to our homes of hope. That was 7 or 8 years ago, and now they are 23, 24 years old, and graduated from college, self-sustaining, and they're leaders in their community, and doing well with their vocation.
I love that that's one story, and you changed generations for these two sisters.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people that you've touched and affected.
Yeah.
These are difficult topics. I imagine that you had to really brace yourself in faith like you have never had before to be able to deal with these topics. Can you talk about that, Al?
I can. One of my spiritual gifts is mercy, and my heart bled.
Yeah.
But I also found there's a joy in carrying the heart of God. There is a real joy in feeling a deep sense of love and a deep sense of compassion.
Mm.
So, in some ways, it's painful, but there are certain pains to bear that bring a joy about them, especially when you're bearing the burdens and the pain of these wounded ones, and the heart of God for them to be rescued and redeemed and restored and recovered. So, I feel
Mm.
great strength, the joy of the Lord. You understand? There was a joy
Yeah.
that brought strength in the midst of this, but it's hard to explain the heartbreaking things we have felt and seen and touched in the lives of these little ones, and wept many tears.
Yes.
Susan, if you had to say what message you hope someone who reads this book will take away, what is that message?
Well, first of all, I think that I want to challenge them in their for courageous faith
Mm.
as they read the stories of persecution. That will inspire them to really rise up with bold faith and to believe that if God can meet them in their suffering, that He will meet them in their suffering.
Mm.
Also, the fact that not only will it challenge their faith, but it will inspire them to realize that God is a redeeming God, and He can redeem the hurt and the loss and the pain and the abandonment, just like these children have faced. And He can redeem those things back, and He can turn them for good.
Yeah, every one of us have internal wounds and slavery of fear and shame, and pride and selfishness that the wounds have strengthened. So we all need the power of the gospel.
Yeah.
One of the main reason why I would say to someone, you should get this book and read it. It will encourage your faith.
Mm.
And through that encouragement of faith, it'll bring the grace of God and the passion of God into your own heart and life. Hope to love others who are in the same need, especially these little ones that are in our homes of hope.
Susan, when you were writing this with Al, did you realize that God was doing something special through this?
Well, all the stories in there are special because we've walked life with these characters that are in the stories. And so they're all special. But when I was writing the very last chapter of the book, and I was reading the healing journal of one of the girls that we call Ellie, and I was hearing how she was rescued and from horrible situations of OSEC, online sexually exploited children, and from the age of 9 to 14. And when I was reading her journal, there was this cry that just rose up in me that for justice for these children, and that there's more Ellies out there that need to be rescued, but also a cry for mercy for what they've gone through. So I think just writing that last chapter that kind of pulled all things together, it really just rose up in me that we needed to do something. These stories need to be told. And we've been telling them for years verbally, but we had never written them down.
Yeah.
So finally we have them in writing to be able to share with the world. And but also when Tim Tebow's foundation heard Ellie's story. Tim was raised in the Philippines, and that's where much of these situations are happening. It's the number one injustice. And when he heard and they heard about Ellie's story, they became Ellie's voice and shared her story. And that voice and that story went viral. And they became a voice in places that our voice would have never reached. And so we know that there's more Ellies that need to be reached and rescued. And there's more children, there's more persecution than ever before. And these are just stories that we knew that were special, that need to be told, because the power of the gospel is what sets people free. And these believers realize that the key to set people free is the power of the gospel. And they don't keep that gospel, they don't keep it hidden and the keys hidden for themselves. Every single one of them are there to offer that key to someone else so they can be set free. Because that's about walking in the liberty and the freedom that God has given us, and to redeem that back so we can be lost in the wonder of who God is and what he's done.
Amen.
Well, we are so blessed to be able to have you share about your ministry, your book, and the passion and the emotion. It's very real and it's very raw. And we thank you so much for putting yourself out there to share with us what we've never seen or experienced. How can people get a hold of, first of all, your book? I know you're represented by Higher Life Publishing, so it's available there. Where else is available?
Well, they can go to our website at compassionatehope.org/breaking chains. And even there, they'll also be able to see video clips of like Ellie's story that Tim Tebow and his wife Demi did. There'll be other stories on there as well. They can also, if they would like for Al and I to come and share some of the stories, they can email us at connect@compassionatehope.org.
Al, Susan, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. And your story is amazing. We would ask that you consider purchasing the book and give them a rating. It really goes a long way. And thank you for sharing this message. Have a great day.
Our joy. Thank you. Blessings.